But our panelist is Holly Castle Work, and she is a Health News California healthcare correspondent with the Kaiser Family Foundation, an independent source for health policy research, polling, and news. Today's discussion is going to center around an area, and I had to look up Pasadena, and Ojibwa word meaning crown of the valley. That's where the name came from. But today's discussion, Molly is going to talk about her article that's astounding. She published this on January 21st of 2025. I encourage you to go to the KFF article itself and read, and it's on their website. But amid wildfire trauma, LA County dispatches mental health workers to evacuees. This is really important, that the mental health aspect often is not spoken about, and what people are going through emotionally. Maybe the emotions are shown on TV, but not what are the real impacts. So it's really great to have you on, Molly. Maybe you can
Thank you.
Give us an overview of what's going on, what you're seeing, and then your article, delving into some of the aspects of the article. I think it was really well written, and the people that you presented in the article really hit my heart. So, please go ahead and give us an idea of what you're trying to convey to us.
Thank you. Same, essentially. Yes, they also really... I felt their stories when I was hearing them. So I'm a reporter in Los Angeles, and I live, for people who aren't in Los Angeles, I live pretty close to the Eden Fire, which is right near Pasadena, the city that you mentioned. And the day after the wildfires started, I decided to go to the Pasadena evacuation site, because we talked about doing this in the past, like the mental health impacts of wildfires, because everyone talks about the public health impacts, but we weren't hearing as much about the mental health impacts. And especially you're affected in that moment, like in those minutes after wildfire, but then there's also those long-term effects that like are not in the news cycle as much. So when the wildfire started in my own city, I was like, I'm going to go to the evacuation site. There were, I think, over a dozen evacuation sites in LA over the past couple of weeks. This was just one of them, and there was over 1,000 people there that night. So that should give you a sense for just how many people were evacuated during these fires. I spoke with a number of people who were evacuated, and they all shared really similar stories, waking up in the middle of the night, seeing flames or ash or embers, and having to leave really quickly and, grabbing prized possessions, family members, pets, and getting out as quickly as they could. I spoke with one person who he did lose his house, and a few others who didn't know if they'd lost their house, but knew that it was definitely a possibility. And I think what I was most struck by is one of the people that I spoke with was a man named Fernando Ramirez, who is part of the Pasadena Public Health Department. And he is an emergency first responder, and he also provides mental health support.
He's one of my heroes now. So it's not a regular article. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was just, same. As soon as I spoke with him, I was like, oh my gosh, he's like the lead in our story, like we want him front and center. So he'd already, spent his normal job is he works for the city. He provides support to people who are homeless on the street, often helping them get resources, maybe if they need help getting housing or food or whatever they need. He'd worked a full day. And then after that, he then volunteered to take on a 14-hour shift that night at the evacuation center. So he's working for 22 straight hours. And he said he was just running on a lot of adrenaline, but really was passionate about being there. But of course, he lives in Los Angeles himself. And he was telling me that as he's driving into work, he had to pull over on the side of the street and just start crying because he could see people trying to water the roof of their homes, hoping that would protect it from the fire. And he just said that, that was really, really heartbreaking to see.
Mhm.
So that was what I think we were interested in, is like, obviously this is a thing that's affecting everyone's mental health, but it's like, of course, also affecting the people that are providing the support as well.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really hit me in your article too. It was really well said, and it was, he was sort of running into the fires, running towards the danger, as police officers do, firemen,
Mhm.
military personnel. They run towards the scene of the incident, in shootings in schools, right? You run towards it, but then he said, but then your mental health catches up with you,
Mhm.
and that's that was really really a good image, of this is, you're running, but you're doing things, but, behind you is that impact of your mental health that's going to catch up with you sooner or later as a responder.
Yeah, we felt the exact same way. That's our last quote in the story, where he's,
Yeah.
yeah, basically saying that he's like running on adrenaline, but then as soon as it's over, that's when the trauma starts to catch up with him. And he made a really interesting point. He's saying that a lot of people in his line of work, well, and everyone, like, we all have our own traumas, and being in situations like this can kind of re-trigger it. And
Mhm.
so he was just, like he said, he's just running on kind of autopilot, just trying to get things done. But he knows that in a few weeks, this is going to kind of come back to him and he'll process it more. And he was honest. He says, I have a weekly therapy appointment to help me manage those feelings
Mhm.
because they can be really hard. He said some of his colleagues, lost homes that day and still came into work.
Wow.
So,
Wow, that's really talk about dedication, selfless service. Yeah. And the human dimension of the mental health and the public health service really struck me too. About the compassion and how you approach someone who's in the middle of a disaster. You were mentioning that as well. That so I'm struck with this, this disaster, and then someone asked me, "Well, how are you feeling? What's your mental health?" It's like, what?
yeah.
My house is burned up. What do you think I'm feeling?
Yeah. Like, obviously, I feel terrible.
Right, right. It's not, something that's enjoyable right now. And so people may push back, on those services a bit because they need some room to, to sort of understand and, to get to the point of really realizing what happened, that this is, this really is something that, and it may seem unreal to them while it's happening, that they're part of this thing. I've heard a lot of descriptions from people that this was like being in a movie scene, and they,
Yeah.
one of those volcano movies, or they just didn't understand how to equilibrate this in their brains, or to figure out what does this mean.
Yeah.
um, but and one of the things that you had mentioned is that mental health services, and many times I'm not sure of how much planning goes into that and whether we need to be doing more, because we plan for putting out the fire, but we don't
Mhm.
really necessarily plan for the mental health putting out the fires there.
Yeah, exactly. That was something that I definitely talked about with the county mental health department was there that night, and so I was able to speak with the director of the department, Dr. Lisa Wong, and she talked about that a little bit. Like, she said, unfortunately, as these wildfires have become more frequent in California, they've learned like more from each wildfire, and they've kind of refined their strategy. And like you said, one of the things they've learned is people don't often want to talk about their mental health on day one. They're in the middle of this crisis, just trying to get through it. But she said they really focus on just like building relationships and making authentic connections with people so that hopefully, and sharing information. So hopefully they know to reach out to the mental health department in the future, which does have a lot of resources that they can connect people with.
Mhm.
So I think that's what to me they seem most concerned about, is that they had a lot of resources to help people, but there wasn't a lot of awareness. So
Yeah, yeah. And one of the real things about this too, that since you're talking about that, is that we have a tendency when we see a disaster, or a hurricane, a flood, a fire, we have a tendency to think in a monolithic way that everyone's the same. You know, so we
mhm,
don't really take into account that people had mental health issues previously, and that they may have had problems with, getting adequate access to care for that. So you have people with anxiety, with depression,
Mhm.
you have people with schizophrenia, PTSD from other instances or other things. And an earlier guest I was mentioning about, from 2013 until now, there's been a fire every year. I mean, they're like 8 to 9,000 fires reported, and it's throughout the year now. It's not There's no fire season; it's a fire year,
Yes.
and yeah, and so it's really, when I start looking at that, it seems like there is a need to figure out, um, you know, who to have some kind of mental health pathway for people who have substance abuse or suicidal ideation. And I mean, this could push people over the edge,
Mhm.
being in a situation like this. So do you think that that's
Definitely.
something we need to look at, or have more resources directed towards it? Or
I mean, yeah, I hope so. That's what I would like to see happen. And yeah, you're exactly right that for a lot of people, this can exacerbate, previous health conditions that they had, like exactly like you said, whether it's anxiety, PTSD, etc. Dr. Wong, the county mental health director, told me also, like, I hadn't thought about this, that a lot of people when they're evacuated don't have their medications with them.
Hmm.
So, maybe they really need different medications, and so they're not themselves when they're at the evacuation site. So,
Mhm.
yeah, there's all these underlying things. And there's even research that, like emerging research, is still pretty early, that smoke itself, like
Hmm.
inhaling lots of wildfire smoke, that could actually damage your brain and make you
Yes.
at increased risk for anxiety. So there's just, yeah, there's all these awful factors that you have to take into consideration. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's my background is like, internal medicine and occupational environmental medicine. So I did a lot with the military as well, other than private, the general practice and that kind of thing. But the toxicology side of it, these fires are in buildings with asbestos, old buildings with asbestos. And then you have man-made mineral fibers, which may not be any better. We
Mhm.
have,
You have
just,
Teslas that are burning, or in any, like, electric
oh,
car, those batteries.
batteries. Yeah. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
and and you start talking about, diesel fuel or gasoline in cars, and the smoke from that, from these fires, and then these, rubber, from the car tires that are burning. I mean, it's a very toxic environment. And if you're not prepared with the right protective gear, the right kind of mask, the firefighters have to really use, sometimes they have to use scoop, like self-contained breathing apparatus,
Yes.
to do that, because even a cloth mask or an N95 maybe not be enough, for things to
Yeah.
go through.
I've been hearing people need to be wearing hazmat suits if they're, like, doing debris cleanup, or
Yes. Yeah.
it's really
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yes, because you can
And we
absorb
don't know
things
what the
via smoke.
long-term effects are gonna be either.
That's right. Yeah, because with the lungs, the heart, and if you already have emphysema or asthma, or you had pneumonia and you were just recovering from that, or COVID, and you were just
Mhm.
recovering from it, you could be, at increased risk. If you have heart disease, or are prone to heart attacks, that kind of thing. Definitely, you are actually in a much higher state of risk. If you swallow them and it goes into your gastrointestinal system, you can metabolize them, and we don't know what the effects are going to be. So
Yeah.
those people have to be watched for 10, 20, 30 years. There's a latency period for some, toxins that are out there.
Yeah. I've
Um,
been seeing comparisons to, 9/11
ah,
20 plus years ago. Just like the same thing
yeah.
where I think we didn't know at the time how dangerous it was to be inhaling that air. And
That's a really good comparison. Yeah, because a lot of the firefighters suffered, the consequences of that later. We know.
yeah, it's
And
really awful.
yeah, and then the convention center, because I think they said, you were saying that they had like 13 shelters, and there was wildfire, and it was like, I think, 64 square miles were destroyed. I mean, that's huge. I mean, I can't
It's huge.
even imagine it. I can't really visualize it because
And
we
just
don't.
like how big, like exactly as you're saying, like I was at one evacuation site. For context, it's this huge convention center that hosts like conferences and expos.
Mhm,
And yeah, it was filled with over 1,000 people, but there's 13 of those evacuation sites. One
mhm,
thing that was just really cool, not really mental health related, but people have talked
mhm,
about this in LA a lot. It's been incredible seeing the community that is showing up in
mhm.
LA. Like, just I was there, this was the first night, and there were so many volunteers and so many donations, and people constantly just like circulating with offers of like hot soup or sandwiches or just a listening ear.
Mhm.
And Fernando, the worker I spoke with, said they had people showing up with donations like till 2 a.m., at night. And it's just, that's been a really incredible thing to see.
Yeah, one of the other things too we don't really talk about much because when we see a fire in one location, um, like in Pasadena, those people have family members all around the country.
Mhm.
So that's not just affecting them; it's affecting their entire family network. And
Mhm.
people are, so the mental health needs are this wide range, wide ranging, and it's wow. I just want to think about scale. It's hard to put your fingers on a scale like this and try to figure out how big is this. When I'm looking at the maps of California and I see fires everywhere, I mean Southern California, I can't even count how many fires there are. Uh,
Yeah. There's
and
another one that popped up today. I don't know if you've seen that already.
Oh, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you can talk a little bit about that. That was in that Castaic, I think.
Yeah. I don't know the area quite as well, but it's a little
Yeah,
northern LA
yeah,
County.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it just popped up today, but it seems like that's been growing pretty fast, which is scary.
Yeah. They said it was like in 2 hours that thing exploded, basically. But
Yeah.
it was over. I think it's over Highway 210 that runs. Up in the northern portion. But this is like 12 miles from LA, downtown LA.
Mhm.
So I'm like, whoa, this is just too much, too
Yeah.
much.
As
Um,
someone who like grew up
and
in Southern California, like you said, I was always used to having a fire season and there being fires in the mountains, but this feels different to me that we're now having fires. Well, not just this year, but
Mhm,
recent years where it's really hitting residential areas. And yeah,
mhm.
and it's happening all year round. It's not just, in the summer and the fall.
Yeah, because one of the things that I also was thinking about, and I had spoken to it a little bit earlier with Harold Taylor, but he's from another region, but he was an IT professional, that kind of thing, about the wildfires. He said that, one of the things is that people's papers, and I saw one thing that just brought me to tears. It was on on television, but one of the news channels, and they had one lady who was a writer, and she had all the journals, she had all the scripts from like 3 or 4 major movies that she had written for, it
Yeah.
all gone, all gone. One person with their Olympic medals gone. I mean, I just so it made me start thinking that there has to be a way we need, and me personally, I need to get my paperwork in a secured thing, in an external hard drive, give it to a family member, something, but just to preserve the things that's so important to you, because we're in a time frame right now with this global warming. I'm living in Illinois and in Tinley Park, and we have the potential for tornadoes coming through now. So
Yeah.
the tornadoes alley is expanding, and we're seeing more tornadoes coming further in areas that we didn't see them previously, and we're getting rainstorms and those kinds of things. I mean, in Louisiana, they were on a blizzard watch. I mean, I've never. It's like we're seeing these things over and over again. So I think it needs to be a national preparedness for this, and families need to make sure that wherever people are living, that there's a connectedness, that they are making sure that they have their information and sharing it, because some of those things are irretrievable. And some people were saying that, put out fires, which can be dangerous sometimes. But the only thing you can't replace in this whole thing is your life. And, you
Mhm.
know, so, as long as you're living, you always have a chance for resiliency and coming back. And, but I think that being prepared for this is going to be a real important factor. Um,
Yeah, I think it was a wake up call I mean, for me, like I didn't get ordered to evacuate, but I was in the voluntary evacuation zone.
mhm,
And I did not take the right stuff. And
mm, mm,
fortunately, my house is okay, but it was a wake up
ah,
call that like I need to be better prepared because I did not take any of the important things like my
mm, mm.
passport or like
Okay.
important documents, sentimental things, prescriptions. So
Ah,
I hope that yeah, we all can be a little more prepared in the future. But
mhm.
yeah, you never expect this sort of thing to happen in LA.
No. Oh, no, no. I mean, because I mean, you can't live in fear every day of your life, right? That,
Mhm.
oh, is this today? Is this today? But then you're not living, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're you're living in fear.
Yeah,
But
totally agree.
having that preparation is really important, and I think that's something that people need to get more in touch with. And so, what else do you think is going on? Have you seen anything else going on as far as the needs of the first responders, or is there something? Because one of the things that you mentioned in the article I thought was really extremely important, and it was Los Angeles County residents in need of support and call the
Mhm.
county's mental health helpline at 1-800-854-7771 and the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And this is confidential and free of charge for that
Mhm.
988. So I think that's something that people need to be aware of, and uh, and their family members too,
Yeah.
because it may be a cousin of yours that lives in another part of town that was affected, or a sister or brother or an uncle, aunt, grandparent. And that's something that people need to know, that is available for them if they need to, seek help for themselves or for someone else.
Yeah. Thank you for spotlighting that. Yes, that was really, really important. We wanted to make sure that made it in the article that there are numbers you can call.
Mhm,
The number you listed is an LA County helpline, and then 988 is national. So anyone can use that confidential, free of charge, as you said. Um, I think one thing I've been just learning a lot the past couple
mhm,
weeks is this is a marathon, not a race.
mhm.
So
Ah,
like we've had it's been incredible seeing how
mhm.
much support LA has gotten, right in the midst of the crisis. What makes me concerned is a lot of these impacts are going to be really long term. Obviously, like mental health, physical, getting homes back, like just rebuilding the city. And so I hope that we can continue to have responders and helpers for the long term.
Yeah, because definitely the effects of a fire are not over when the flames are extinguished. There are multiple implications, down the road that people are going to have to contend with. And the mental health crisis is one of the issues, but then the physical health crisis too.
Mhm.
And one of the things that in that area we were talking before about the 64 square miles, uh, you reported 12,300 buildings at least that were destroyed since
Yeah.
January 7th. I mean, that's
And it might even
amazing.
be more now because we published this last week, so it might
Oh,
have
boy.
grown.
Oh,
Yeah, it's horrifying, and LA already has, we don't
mhm.
have enough affordable housing already, so it's really concerning what's gonna happen and
Mhm. Yeah, and people
how
have to realize this includes churches, synagogues, mosques. It's
schools.
schools. It's recreational facilities. It's your homes. It's the businesses, and now businesses are out of business. Right?
Mhm,
People don't have jobs. This is why I think the nation needs to step up and call in and donate. Give something to help this situation. It's almost and it was AccuWeather estimate. You were saying that estimated over $250 billion in economic losses. I mean, that is devastating.
Yeah,
So,
it's record breaking too.
right. And if there's anything we can do to help people's physical health and their mental health, is to help by donating and giving support.
Mhm.
Um, this is the thing that we, as Americans, should be doing. We have a lot of veterans in the area too. VFW posts, and I'm not sure how many of those were involved, as well as American Legion posts. So, police officers, firefighters, some may be injured. I don't know what the toll is going to be on them and their ranks and their families, because they're fighting these fires. But we have got to keep them in our, thoughts and prayers, but also on our credit cards. uh, we need to be helping and supporting them in any way we can.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so we're, running short on time as usual. Anytime I have the Kaiser Family Foundation, your articles are so powerful. I say we
Well,
need to
thank
have an
you.
hour.
That's so nice. Yeah.
But we need to have an hour. But I was telling people, make sure that you go and read this article. I think it was really well written, and it gets right to the point. Um, amid wildlife trauma, and LA County dispatches mental health workers to evacuees. Again, it was published on January 21st, 2025. And this, Molly, this was a really well written article. People need to read this and understand the human toll, as well as the mental health toll on the people who are there. I haven't seen an article written on that. I've seen, descriptions of a fire, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we have a tendency to see,
Mhm.
and in the media sometimes what leads. That's the old saying that they want to focus on the, big scenes and
Mhm.
but these are human beings, these are people that we are talking about, not numbers and statistics, but human people.
Yeah.
And again, that Suicide Crisis Lifeline is 988. Then you can also go for the helpline in Los Angeles County by calling 1-800-854-7771.